Genshin Impact just announced that it will allow you to raise your characters past level 90 all the way to level 100, exclusively through getting what used to be completely useless copies of an already maxed out character. And so I thought it was about time to talk about all the ways Hoyo has been mishandling duplicate characters for years, before talking about the impact and downsides of this new system with all of that in mind. Their basic design is flawed. When you get a duplicate in Genshin, Star Rail or Zenless, you can unlock a new effect that is totally individual to the character. Hu Tao's first duplicate makes her charge attack no longer consume stamina. Her second duplicate strengthens the minor kind of dot damage that her skill applies to enemies. Only the third and fifth duplicates are pretty much the same across characters, increasing some of their talent levels. This leads to several issues compared to other games that provide the same simple, raw stat or scaling increases across all of their characters. Firstly is power creep. Not only are the characters themselves able to be increasingly outclassed by newer ones, but so are the potential improvements from investing further into them. This doesn't just matter to whales or whatever, but also affects everyone's ability to try and continue using their favourites. Albedo in Genshin Impact has not been good for a long time, and was straight up power crept and replaced by a new, seemingly less popular and definitely less important character a little over a year ago. If you really like Albedo and his lore and potential role in the story, you might try to keep him relevant by slowly pulling for more duplicates over time, only to find that they buff his useless burst, provide minuscule buffs to your team, and provide very little change to the way you actually play him or his ability to be played. Meanwhile, Chiori, the character that replaced him, gets her team options opened up, large damage increases, and the option of becoming a very strong on-fielder when maxed out at C6. If you rolled 7 copies of Albedo, they still probably wouldn't really even be worth as much as 1 Chiori, never mind 2 or 3. And it's the same for many characters across their games. E2 Dill was considered insane at release, increasing his damage more than a lot of characters did even at E6 by a whole 70%. While most modern characters can have their already much stronger baseline doubled at the same investment. This means that characters can not just be power crept, but can be nearly exponentially power crept when comparing at similar higher investment levels, punishing you further if you try to keep your favourites useful over time. And something that never occurred to me until I recently learnt of a controversy that took place in the Chinese community of Star Rail around the release of Sunday is that these unique duplicates can also allow kind of perverse balancing incentives. So let's look at Sunday, a very powerful support's Eidolons. His first Eidolon gets up to 40% defense ignore, only for summons. The character gets only 16%, less than Ruan Mei a year prior, or even the character's own sister got on their first Eidolons. His second gives 2 SP, wow, only once per battle, and otherwise only gives 30 damage %, which is decent, but the character will probably already have quite a lot of, and he already gives in his base kit. And it continues on. 8 energy, wow. And then just a whole lot of words to say 80% crit damage. Compare this to Sparkle, who released almost a year before and who gets similar effects but at a higher value and team-wide rather than for only one ally. The controversy around Sunday was from Chinese female players, who, very, very generally, are more likely to invest in their favourite characters. And once you think about it, you can kind of see a pattern. HSR launched with Seele and Jingyuan. One gets 80% stronger at max, and the other gets 50%. Which, by the way, is another good example of the power creep of Eidolons and duplicates, when those characters with 6 duplicates got 80 and 50% stronger, while modern characters with 2 get 100% stronger. But I talked about Albedo already, but also Hu Tao, who had some of the largest increases at the time, released at the same time as Xiao, who gets virtually nothing until he's completely maxed out. And then Tartaglia, Venti, Alhaitham, Baiju, Ito, Wanderer all get less or even no benefit from their constellations. I don't think this was done maliciously, maybe probably not deliberately at all even, but I can see it being done out of balancing. If female players are more likely to pull these duplicates, then does that not kind of become their baseline? Like, if everyone rolled for C2, for example, would that not just become what the whole game was balanced around, and result in C2 characters being as strong as C0 characters currently are? And if they're more likely to roll more copies of a character anyway, then they don't need baited into pulling them. They instead need to be less game-changing and more balanced. Rather than being baited into pulling duplicates, they instead balance around baiting future characters by making it easier for them to still compete with even a maxed out character. My point isn't that Hoyo does have any kind of gender preference, or that they did treat male duplicates any differently. I don't speak Chinese or anything, and I only just found out about it recently, so I could just be totally wrong about that whole part. And if it did happen, it seems to be something they've learnt from and stopped doing, as all Eidolons for male characters since Sunday in Star Rail are just as good, if not better even, than their female counterparts. But my point is just that they shouldn't be able to do that. It's not something that should really even be possible. The problem doesn't require any favoritism or different balance incentives either. A huge amount of those characters I listed just have core design issues with their kits. And so, is it really a good idea for the strength the character gets from investment that's supposed to allow you to get rid of and overcome those issues so that you can use them more or for longer, to also be bespokely designed by the same dev team that made those core issues in the first place? Take Eula as a personal example. I really like her, and even when she was still pretty goodish, I would have liked to just all around improve and make her stronger. But while she does have some very strong constellations for the time, they pretty much only really strengthen her burst, that makes up only something like 60% of her damage, at base at least, and is the part of her kit that has aged the most, and is most poorly designed with its awkwardness and backloaded damage. If you instead want to strengthen her normal attacks, for example, because that's what you're spending your time actually doing, and they were the benefit of her damage type being physical, you're pretty much out of luck. Compare this to FGO, because I've also liked for a while how it handles increasing your character's levels from 90 to 100. Every character in that game generally gets the same from duplicates. The first gets you a 33% increase, and it decreases from there, so that at most you get a 66% increase. This kind of simplicity and uniformity also helps prevent seemingly basic functionality being carved out of a character's base kit and sold to you for extra. But also, separately, you can increase a character's level from 90 to 100 using a special item. Sound familiar? Except in FGO, that item you only get from finishing story chapters and event stories, and eventually from getting any characters. It's a bit much to go through in detail, but FGO added a system with its own downsides, where anytime you roll a character, even your first copy, you get a certain number of coins, which can then be used to exchange for up to 2 grails per month, the item that allows you to raise characters' max level. And that game also actually has 1 to 3 star characters that can only be gotten through a separate free gacha, which you can then use to get the coins for the monthly grails. You get the currency to roll the free gacha passively, but you also can actually farm it in one of the game's bi-annual unlimited farming events, alongside pretty much everything else you would want to farm at the same time. This had a large positive impact on how I personally play the game. It gave me motivation to build teams and use a wide variety of characters to prepare for and farm those events as efficiently as possible, so I could farm them an insane amount, so that I could then achieve the long-term goals of character investment and levels that the system's increased amount of grails allowed me to make in the first place. For me at least, it was a whole feedback loop that strengthened the game as a whole, whereas Genshin's system just makes me not feel so bad if I lose a 50-50 to a character I already have C6. If I've been playing long enough to already have any of them C6, something which I only just did a couple of months ago after playing as a light spender for around 4 years and losing every bloody 50-50 for 2 of them. And even then, my only C6 is the one I rolled as much as possible for on release, and also chose for anniversary. Otherwise, beyond just making me feel slightly better if I don't get what I actually want, the change just gives whales another reason to spend, even on characters they already have maxed. It's actually really quite disappointing to me the more I think about it, because grails are, I think, one of the best things about FGO for me. Being able to strengthen characters not just through gacha duplicates, but also separately through stats is just great. It allows you to completely enhance a character, to effectively increase the rarity of a character you like, to show and commit to your favourites without having to spend, and can motivate you to play and find uses for those characters you want to invest in. To give such a strong and motivating reward only from yet more gacha is just a complete waste. Imagine, for example, if sanctifying elixirs weren't given out in Genshin as a reward for exploring the majority of each area in Natlan, and instead were just gotten from gacha. Or, and don't get hung up on this specific example too much because it has a lot of its own issues, but imagine if these new level increasing items were instead given out from something like exploring the world on a new, much more difficult world level, giving you more motivation to explore and engage with the world and play at a much higher difficulty, where you can actually use all of your endgame characters, not just once a fortnight, but a lot. As much as you like, basically. And that's just the wasted potential. Never mind all of the balancing issues, HP inflation, and power creep that this incentivizes. I want to be excited about the system and all the possibilities that it can enable, and I'm sure I will enjoy it if I get another Dia, And even if not, I will get a fair amount of fun out of just thinking about and planning who I would level, and learning about all the different benefits and impacts on characters with different strengths and weaknesses. But I can't help but think of the wasted opportunity and seemingly bad game design of the way they have so far seemingly decided to implement it, and their handling of duplicates as a whole. The train has pretty much set sail on fixing the fundamental issues with having unique duplicate effects, but hopefully, at least for this new system, they can just add and give out this new item from other more creative and interesting sources. I think I'll also make a video about the underlying reason for Hoyo's power creep problem that I never see discussed, and I've also thought about editing down their stories into compilations or even supercuts that cut out all of the fluff and filler and time wasting that is sometimes present. So subscribe, and also check out my other channel, where in about the next month or so I should be uploading a video explaining the entire Fate franchise, in case you're interested in FGO a bit. I've also put an affiliate link in the description for Loot Bar, because it turns out they let anyone have one, and I've been using them for a while to buy my Welkins, and even the occasional top-up bonus without any issues. And it saves me the hassle of using a VPN and everything to just pay in dollars for slightly better prices. So, I'm not sponsored or anything, but if you want to use it, the link's there. Thank you so much for watching. Until hopefully next time, bye.